But what I will say is that not only is it not just the large companies that are embracing this kind of technology when it comes to industrial data strategies, visibility throughout the value chain and the supplier network, but the smaller companies and the mid-sized companies that make the value stream, right? They create this value stream of suppliers and sometimes distributors on the other end, right? The folks in those brackets that start to embrace this technology today, they are really becoming the heroes of this digital transformation effort, because when a 3M or a GE or a fill in the blank, one of the top manufacturers or largest manufacturers, when they start to do these efforts around digitization and digital transformation, especially when they're focused on supply chain, one of the key ingredients to make all of this work is supplier visibility. Right. And so without embracing the technology at the small and medium level, the biggest people in this space actually can't be successful, which is quite impactful. And you don't really hear a lot of people talking about that.
That's a good point, because these larger players, they're all after supply chain visibility, but they're also taking in inputs upstream from smaller players that are either making specialized valves or tooling or other things that are going into the final product. And so the visibility at the bigger player is going to be a function of the visibility that you could gain upstream from the smaller players. So one way to make yourself more valuable downstream as a mid-sized company, if you are providing those inputs to those bigger firms, is to digitize, is to create more visibility. And that's a way to stand out amongst all the other suppliers. If you don't have to necessarily compete on price, you can say, hey, we're also going to give you a lot more visibility and more certainty in terms of knowing what's going to be coming downstream from us to you.
And if you want to be really provocative about this, right? So if we want to take a bold stance, we could look at it from the complete other side of the coin of, not only could you perhaps get out of this competitive situation where you're having to be very aggressive around pricing discounts and volume discounts and commits and things like that, flip the coin and now you have potentially access to a lot of data that these companies might find valuable. Could you license it to them? Could you sell them the data, right, to help with their forecasting and S&OP planning and all of the things that revolve around the value chain? I don't know, right? Perhaps, maybe. It's a bit provocative, right?
Right. And I think what we did right now is we sort of touched on examples of those three basic objectives that we talked about. One is improving your overall operational efficiency. So we talked about that visibility. So if something breaks down, then quickly doing root cause on that and getting the machine back up and running to minimize your downtime. That's operational efficiency. But we also talked about increasing the overall customer experience. And for some of these mom and pop shops or these smaller operations, it might be the 3Ms of the world that are taking their items as inputs, and so you're making yourself more valuable to them by providing more visibility via their supply chain objectives. And then 3, we talked about creating a new business model. So now you have this data and you can say, hey, 3M, like, would you want to have early access to this, or can we cut this up in a different way for you? Can we give it to you in a different way? Now let's start building on this digital transformation infrastructure that we've built up to provide more value in that way as well. So I really like those 3 examples that we're touching on.
Forgive me because I get so excited about this stuff. I think I blurted out probably an hour's worth of content in like 1 minute. But I think it's really important to level set when we think about the different ways that this applies to organizations. And on the supply chain front, just before we move on from that one, I do think it's a really important call out. This is not a pie in the sky idea, by the way. Every manufacturer on the planet, every mature manufacturer on the planet, throughout the last 2.5 years, throughout this pandemic, right, they realized, hey, we need to invest in supply chain resiliency. And the heart of that is data-driven decisions in your supply chain, finding single source bottlenecks, for example, right? The days of having one supplier for a core component or a critical component, those days are numbered, right? Because the pandemic has really opened our eyes for some of the largest companies in the world that they can't be locked in the value chain to just one supplier for a component, because when there is a global event, let's just say that adversely impacts the supply chain, well, it only takes that one bottleneck and now you can't produce whatever it is that you make. And by the way, Manny, this is not new, right? This has been a challenge for a long time. Even if we think back to what happened back in Fukushima, right, with the nuclear event that happened there, right? And if I don't know if you know this, but there was a what I would call a critical supplier for all of the large automotive manufacturers that was based right outside Fukushima in an area that was impacted by the event. And it's been a while since I looked up this fact, but I want to say for the better part of a year, if not more than a year, all of the large, well, let me be careful when I say that, a significant portion of the large automotive OEMs, right, they actually could not produce new black paint. So for that period of time, if you bought a black car, it had already been painted before Fukushima happened, or it had been painted using inventory, right, or excess inventory of black paint. But there was no new production for something like a year, because there was a core component in the black paint that was only sourced in the whole world, right?
Wow. Well, and it's a good example. You can also look more recently to the microcontroller shortage that we've had over the last couple of years. I know that I've had clients that wanted to do a lot of prototyping for their connected products. We couldn't get the microcontrollers needed to prototype all the versions that we were working on, so it really slowed down our production. They were competing with Ford and GM to get these microcontrollers as well, so everybody was in line to get these. It was a major bottleneck. I've heard this complaint from my medium-sized manufacturers and machine part makers, is that it's hard for us to compete beyond price. It's hard for us to differentiate ourselves, and the key takeaway here is that digital transformation, analytics, data, this is one way for you to break out of that price comparison. So you can offer more visibility, you can offer better customer service, you can offer data products and services, and they might all be built off your initial digital transformation initiatives.